after students and to suppress speech. And as I was reading this story, I know a lot of people at the Heritage Foundation kind of on both sides of the generational divide, like some of the people who are more from the neoconservative version of the Republican Party and people who are in the like new right MAGA world. And as I'm listening to Theo Von, I'm thinking, this is going to be a real problem for the old neoconservative Republicans going forward, because as much as it looks like Witkoff is, pulling a fast one and not doing what he said to put pressure on Israel to get an end to the conflict, increasingly, the younger voters in the Republican Party, but even younger staff, is just not on board with this anymore. And they're all listening to people like Theo Von, Joe Rogan. They just have a completely different worldview when it comes to this particular issue. So as I was watching it, that's what was going through my head, that like this does resonate, this does move young people on the right, and that is not going to be easily blended with the old neoconservative approach to this for much longer.
Yeah. I mean, I appreciate him saying this to his audience. I want to know if he's also saying it to Jared and Ivanka when he's having dinner with them in a very friendly way. Like, if you're saying this is a genocide, and then he also just went, we can put this up on the screen, A10, he was in Qatar with Trump there. Theo Von riffs on drugs, disabilities, and homosexuality before Trump speaks at U.S. base in Qatar. So, I mean, this is someone who has public power because he's very influential with a large group of young men. And so him using his voice on his platform matters a lot there. But he also has private power because Trump does attribute, some of his electoral victory to people like Theo Von. He's routinely described as Trump's favorite podcast.
Barron probably listens to Theo Von if reports are correct.
Yeah, that's right. That was the reporting that Barron was instrumental in putting them together. So he also has private power, and I think that's a real question is, okay, if you see this is a genocide, which I agree with, and at this point many other people do as well, not to mention international organizations as well, like, okay, are you using the inside track that you have to exert pressure internally as well? So that would be my question. But I do think we can go ahead. Let's skip ahead to A12, to your point about the way that public opinion has shifted, because, it's this kind of dichotomy where at the same time that Israel is at its almost like most powerful, all the countries that's bombing and territory that it's annexing and, on the verge of effectively a final solution in Gaza, the backing in the U.S. has taken a dramatic hit. Not among elite elected politicians so much,
right,
but among the people. Just look at these numbers, the way that negative views of Israel have risen in the U.S. So first of all, for maybe the first time ever, majority of U.S. adults, have a negative view of the state of Israel.
So they were asked, so this is a question of, they were asked if they have an unfavorable view of Israel, straight up. That goes from 42% in 2022 to 53% in 2025.
That's right. And Republicans are still the group that has the largest, favorable proportion. But look at that generational divide that Emily was pointing to. So now you have a majority of Republicans between 18 and 49, so not even that particularly young, 50% now say they have an unfavorable view. Man, those boomer Republicans, though, they love them some Israel. They have barely budged.
Look at those. The number, the generational divide is more than half. So only 23% of 50-plus Republicans have an unfavorable view of Israel. And it's, as Crystal said, 50% of ages 18 to 49. I bet if you just did 18 to 24, that number would be even higher.
I have no doubt about that.
And these are all people in one party. And granted, it's not what people go to the polls and vote based on, but it does create a permission structure for politicians to act in various ways. So when you look at those numbers, at some point, that has to change the way Republican politicians approach the issue. You would think, but that's what Theo Von gets to at the end of his moment there, where he says it feels like there's nothing.
It feels like what we want doesn't really matter. And if you look at the Democratic numbers there, you see a huge shift where now you've got 69% of Democrats and lean Dems overall with an unfavorable view, and a much smaller
basically no
generational divide. So 71% of 18 to 49-year-olds. 66% of 50 plus. And those 50 plus in the Democratic Party, that is the group that has moved the most. Because it used to be just if you're of an older generation, like Joe Biden, you support Israel and you really don't think too much about it. And that has shifted dramatically. And yeah, I mean, I actually do think that this issue is important electorally. I think it's going to be quite significant in the Democratic primary in 2028. I think it will be a litmus test in the Democratic primary in 2028. And I also think, you know, I mean, it speaks to the hypocrisies of America First when you're claiming like, okay, we're just going to focus on U.S. interests, and yet you're still funding this genocide with our tax dollars, shipping all this money and weapons and diplomatic support to Israel to do whatever the hell Israel wants to do. So there is an electoral hypocrisy there that also, I think, you know, I don't think it will be insignificant. Not that it's going to be everybody's number one issue, but when we talk to those AOC Trump voters, a lot of them actually did bring up Ukraine and Israel and, you know, a sense of dissatisfaction with Biden and Harris on those issues in particular. So I don't want to downplay it either.
Well, and for a lot of working class voters, you look at that actually as a material kitchen table concern for yourself, because it makes you angry that you're struggling in no small part in some cases because of the way the government has structured the economy, because of the way the government spends its money. And you see all of this funding going to foreign conflicts with, in many cases, no end in sight.
And politicians who seem to care more about a foreign country than they do this one.
100%. So, yeah, I mean, I think this is also, and this is something that I don't think those older neoconservative, actually I should say Republicans and Democrats have grappled with yet, is the post imperial era of America's like approach to the Middle East. So for generations that grew up amidst the failures in Iraq and Afghanistan, that looking at Israel post October 7th, I think it's actually just a very different dynamic. And we could go back and have conversations about historical Israel and the last 100 years of history in Israel, if not longer, but. There's definitely, this is a new chapter in American relationship. Like post October 7th is a new chapter in America's relationship with Israel. And in a sense, I think for a lot of people, it's come across as much more egregious, as a different version or a changed version. I shouldn't say different, but a changed version of Israel that's engaging in negotiations with the U.S. and that is having these back and forth with U.S. power. So, I mean, I think that's one thing that just has not been understood very well is Israel is in a different position these days.
Well, and one of the most, going back to Theo Vaughn's comments, one of the most potent arguments that pro-Israel people have made in the past is, well, you don't understand the history, it's too complicated.
Yes.
So just stay out of it. Just let us worry about it. You don't worry about it. Just trust us that you're on the right side. It's all good.
It's good versus bad, right? Like there's always this very Manichaean, dark and light, good and bad. And what they don't understand is now with social media, you can see everything.
Right. And so I think that that worked really well on liberals for a long time of like, well, the history is just really complicated and you don't understand. And now, because those images are so undeniable, it has sort of overcome this unwillingness to engage with it, where it's like, okay, but maybe I don't need to know 100 years of history. Maybe I can have my own moral judgment about what's being done right now today in the present with my tax dollars and as the world watches.
Ryan and I fell into a long conversation on an episode a few months ago about how what happened to Shireen Abu Akleh was a sort of changing moment for me. And part of that was because you could piece together so many different social media, so much different evidence from social media, and like all these different angles of video, all of these different movements were captured on iPhone cameras or smartphone cameras.
Right.
And when you're able to see so much different pieces of the puzzle, you can put it together in ways that gives the propaganda a lot less power.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think also coming at a time when trust in mainstream media has never been lower, their ability to manufacture consent is vastly diminished, certainly within the Republican Party, but increasingly within the Democratic Party as well. There was one more thing we wanted to get to here, which again, I think is kind of a sign of the times, which is Bernie Sanders on the most mainstream shows you could get on with Stephen Colbert late night. and calling out directly the influence of AIPAC specifically